It's really super exciting to see you all. One of my favorite subjects is getting out on the rivers. And as I said, I've been working on the Nashua and its tributaries with students, with school groups, with adults for 25 years now. So it really has been sort of my own backyard for a while, but I'm sure some of you have had some great experiences on it too. The program that I've got set up tonight really kind of is a nice introduction to both our river system, our watershed, our river system here in Nash River watershed area, but also paddling in general, things to think about, and some resources that we have that will help you in using this area. And I do really encourage you to plan to get out. We've still got some great weather ahead of us for paddling until it gets too cold. We usually stop doing groups at the end of October because of the temperature of water, and that's something to really always think about when you do paddling. You don't want water that is going to create a problem for your body if you accidentally do go in. So we're pretty careful about not doing that, not taking our groups out after October, but some people who are really good paddlers will continue into the later months as well. And then, of course, spring usually is a big flurry of people wanting to get out again. So hopefully you'll get out this fall before the end of this season and it gets too cold and icy out there. What I would like to do is to start by introducing you to our river and our watershed, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we call it Paddling 101 because it does give some real basics as well as gives you an opportunity to ask some very specific questions. I will mention, because I think it's important, that we worked with the National Park Foundation to put this program on. They have given the NRWA a specific grant, which is supporting this work as well as our new river guide that you will be seeing a little bit more of during the presentation. So that's kind of a nice thumbs up to them for the help that they're giving us. Sorry, it's going to take me a second to go through. So the Nashua River Watershed Association oversees the Nashua River Watershed, which is quite a large area of land. And if you're not familiar with what a watershed is, I'm just going to give you one sentence to help you think about it. A watershed is all the land that collects the water and carries it to the lowest point. And that water is being collected on many, many, many miles of land that does not look like a body of water, but it's ultimately going to a body of water. So in the Nashua River watershed, we have 538 square miles of land that is collecting that water. And within that, there are 32 communities. And not all of those communities actually have a river running through them, but they're very important to the health of the river because what happens on their land with water affects our river very much. There are 85 miles of river waterways within the Nashua River watershed. That doesn't even include the streams. That's just what we call river mileage waterways. And that includes the Nashua River, Squanicook, Nissitissit, and the North Nashua and Still Water rivers. And if you look at my image on the right, you can see that our main stem, which we call our main stem of the Nashua, starts way down at the bottom of that picture, what's titled the roadmap for the Nashua River watershed, down at the Wachusett Reservoir area. And then it goes all the way up the right side of our watershed to Nashua, New Hampshire, where it empties into the Merrimack. And then the water from the Nashua in the Merrimack travels out to Newburyport, Massachusetts, where it enters into the ocean. So always a great concept to remember that our rivers and waterways are all connected and our water is all connected, and therefore the health of everything is affected by very specific areas, such as this watershed affects the Merrimack and affects the ocean as well. So I also want to tell you a little bit about the fact that we are now a designated wild and scenic river system, and that's a pretty special designation. We were designated the Nashua, Squanicook, and Nissitissit rivers. And actually, you know what? I should have told you that before, but I'll show you on a map in a minute. The main stem, what we call the Nashua, is also connected to four main, let me see if I can go back there. four main tributaries. So if you're looking at the top tributary, that's the Nissitissit. The next one down is the Squanicook. The next one down is the North Nashua, and the bottom one is called the Still River. And these are the major waterways that are bringing water from the western part of our watershed to our river, the Nashua River, and filling it and sending that water along. So in this partnership that we created, we have three river systems, three river areas that on March 12th of 2019 were designated by the Nashua Wild Rivers Act. And this act had to go through Congress. It had to be signed off by the president, and it protects 52.8 miles of these rivers. And the benefits of that are really terrific because it creates a better protection for the area. It opens opportunity for us to get funding to help protect these wild and scenic areas, and not just to protect them, but to increase recreation and all the aspects of it. And this kind of will show you a little bit of what part that is. So this section of the Nashua here and these two major tributaries are all part of the wild and scenic. This is the Nissitissit again and the Squanicook. So it's a pretty substantial part of our watershed that was actually designated, and we're very lucky that it has that now. And just to understand what a classification for this means, there's sort of three major categories. Wild river areas, so free of impoundments, allowed to kind of be a natural river without a lot of human influence on it. Scenic river areas, so sections that are scenic and invite wildlife and allow for a real natural balance of wildlife, animal, and plant, and also good water quality. And then recreational river areas, so areas that make it accessible for people to be able to make use of these riverways as well. So those three areas had to be really proven in order for us to get this classification. And so we feel very proud that we were able to acquire that, and it now is a great protection and a great way for us to continue our work. So let's jump into really what the paddling goals are for people, because I'm assuming many of you signed up for this because you're thinking about yourselves in the future, getting out there, making use of waterways and rivers, and whether you're here in our watershed or you're even on the ocean or in another lake area or whatever, a lot of things are very, very are able to be used across different areas that we like to paddle. But people have paddling goals. And so I just wanted to mention them because a lot of people love paddling for exploring. I think that's kind of my favorite, is just getting out there to explore and see the natural world. Exercise is a great opportunity. And we saw a real rise in paddling during COVID because it was one way in which people could get out and exercise and still be away from other people. So I think that's when it was almost impossible, if some of you know, to even buy a kayak because the equipment was all gone very quickly. Everybody was excited. Connecting with nature, very important for me as well. And I'm sure you all find that a real pleasurable part of being on our waterways. Solitude, beauty, challenging your abilities, which can be, different parts of the waterways can be challenging depending on where you're paddling and what type of vessel you're paddling. And then what we call running the river, people who like to travel from point to point and see a section of the river, or sometimes actually complete the whole river over a period of time. So a lot of people have different types of goals, and you may be starting to think about what your goals are for your future use with your paddle. I'm going to talk about the different crafts that are most common on our waterways, our paddling crafts, I should say. And canoes are my favorite choice just because I find them incredibly useful, and they have a lot of benefits to them. They're a very old craft, designed by the indigenous people of this area and other parts of Northern America. But they are generally a larger vessel, I should say, and they can carry more in them. So they really work well for groups of people, for families with children. You sit up high and look out over the water, which is super helpful when you're trying to really explore and understand all the area around you. Um, they require a single blade paddle. A canoe paddle is obviously a single blade, and that has certain types of techniques which allow you to effectively paddle your boat. Most canoes people think of as tandem boats, one person in the front, one person in the back, but there's also solo canoe paddling, which is one of my favorite things to do. And there are a variety of methods. And if you're interested in learning better techniques, there are a lot of ways to kind of take a class. I do know that Neshoba Paddler here in Groton, West Groton area, will actually provide lessons if you want to get lessons in any of these vehicles, these vessels, these crafts, and they provide really good support for that. Um, Kayaks are often lighter to handle and much easier to maneuver for somebody who's solo because it's a little bit more innate in that you've got a double paddle blade. And so really it's harder to mess up with a kayak in that respect. You do sit lower in the water. You often sit pretty low into your boat. So your view of what's around you is kind of a different perspective. So I always keep that in mind when I'm talking to people about going out because some people really enjoy that and some people want to be up a little bit higher. And then, of course, the new big fancy thing that you see out everywhere now are stand-up paddle boards. We call them SUPs. And they are a fun activity. They're not so often used for long distance paddling, although I do know some people that have done that. They require a lot of good balance, as you can tell from the picture. Some people stand on them, other people kneel on them if they're not comfortable standing. Some dogs like to ride the front of them, like mine. And they do give a very high perspective because you're up really high and you can really look down in the water and look around. You're challenging your muscles a little bit more because of your balance. And they're much harder to carry any cargo with. Some people put small packs on them and things like that, but they are definitely a little bit more challenging that way. They are clearly a solo boat. It's a little hard to do anything with two people. I've seen people playing around trying to, but they're not really designed for that. And they have this very long single paddle that you use actually in a very similar way to canoeing. So it's similar, but it requires a lot of concentration to do it well. So those are our three major vessels that we use on water around here. And then we need other equipment. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about thinking about your equipment when you go out. And equipment is really pretty important. As somebody who has run thousands and thousands of programs with groups, it's just the one thing you don't have that you need on the day that you need it. So it's really good to have your equipment together, well protected, and just making sure that you are really well covered for the day. So I'm going to show you a little list of what I tend to think about with my equipment. And I always consider essentials. Number one, approved PFD, Life Vest, number one. And I will mention to you that it is absolutely required by the state of Massachusetts, if you're in Massachusetts, to wear a life vest from the end of September to the beginning of May when you are in a paddle boat or any actually boat. I think it's a little unfortunate that it's not year round. There are some states that do year round because, frankly, PFDs save lives, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives every year. And often it's accidents that people are really unprepared for or don't really realize is going to happen. So I'm a big fan of wearing mine no matter what. And I've got a good, comfortable one that I love, and it works very well. I always make sure I have really good sturdy footwear on because the minute you need to be able to step out and step on something, you want something good on your foot rather than a pair of flip-flops. So thinking about something that protects your foot and stays on your foot. Water, of course, always important to have drinking water to take care of yourself. Maps. It's always good to have a goal if you really don't know the area, to have something that tells you what to do. And in a little bit, you're going to see our NRWA River Guide examples of it. And that's one really good way to make sure you know where you are and understand the details of what's around you. If you're bringing your phone with you, good to have it in a waterproof sleeve and a way to attach it to the boat or to yourself so that nothing happens to it. Warm jacket or pullover fleece. I actually bring it all summer long because sometimes people's bodies, core bodies, get cold if they end up in the water, even in the summer. And that can be one of the most important things to do is to warm them up. Rain gear, never leave without it in my dry bag. And obviously a hat's always useful, and sunscreen. Um, Other additions that people like to bring are bug repellent. It's interesting with rivers because rivers tend to be moving water, even if they're slow moving. They tend not to have a lot of bug, particularly mosquito type issues in the middle of the river. Along the shore and on the banks, yeah, you get it, but not so much in the river. So I always tell people to kind of bring it and judge when you need it. If you don't like to use it, just, figure out if you need it and where you need it. Energy snacks I always bring. I like to wear paddling gloves because they both protect my hands and also they really give you good grip. Uh, I use a knee pad for kneeling because I like to put my knees down and create 3 points of contact, which means that my back end is basically resting on the edge of the the canoe seat, and my two knees are down. Now, this is in a canoe. If I'm in a kayak, obviously I'm sitting right down in the seat, but I use a knee pad for kneeling. I always bring a flashlight, a little knife, magnifying glass. I'm very curious, so I like to have my magnifying glass to check things out. I like to bring nature ID books. Of course, all of this can go in a waterproof bag, and there are some great dry bags, easy to find now in any outdoor store or Dick's Sporting Goods or anything. So they're everywhere now. And I'm a big binocular user because I love to watch wildlife, particularly birds. So those are kind of my useful additions that I always make sure I have on my trip. Safety is probably the most important thing that we can talk about. And I never, ever have a lesson, even a short lesson, without talking about safety. And there are various ways to look at safety. There's safety rules of how to use your particular craft, your vessel, and that really can be very specific to it. Getting into a kayak, as you all probably know, is different than getting into a canoe. And getting in and getting on and up on a stand-up paddleboard is obviously a very unique thing too. So there are some safety things that you can think about very specifically and learn when you're practicing with your boat. But I'm going to talk more about just kind of the big rules of thumb that we think about. I already told you about life preservers, and I even wrote down over here on the left what the actual laws are for that. So it's pretty important that we keep that in mind. Weather conditions are super important to pay attention to. And what happens with people is if the water temperature does get too low, the first thing that happens is they are unable to use their hands, then they are unable to move their bodies, they're unable to speak, and then they become exhausted or unconscious. And those can be the steps for hypothermia. So we often really, talk about how important it is to pay attention. The great news about rivers like the ones that we have is that the shoreline is fairly close. So when I do a group, I always remind them that the best thing to do would be to get up on the shore if it's cold and you got to get out of the water instead of fussing with your boat. Let other people help you with that. So that's a pretty important one, is paying attention to that. I'm going to show you a little bit more about how to follow the weather in a little bit. I also have a note down at the bottom here, and that is that I'm actually going to make this smaller so I don't see. Okay, that is that heavy rain, spring snowmelt, and multiple rain days can quickly increase water levels and create what we call pushy moving water. We don't have a lot of pushy moving water in the Nashua River watershed area. There's very little of it at this time of year. But in the springtime, it can be a different story and it can become very dangerous. So knowing where that river is at, as well as what the temperatures for the day and what the weather for the day is important. So I'm going to show you that you've got a couple of resources available to you online that you can make use of right on your phone. And my absolute favorite weather app, which pretty much all the professional paddlers and water sports people that I know use the same one, is the NOAA weather site, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration website. And it has this really nifty graph in it, and I'm going to show you how to get to it. But this graph is what I live by when I'm taking school groups out on the water. So I'll just pop in here for a second and show you. So when you pull it up, you get, their basic page. Now, see, it's already knows that I'm in Groton. So if I scoot to the top and I click on Groton, I'm going to get the weather for today, but I can go to see local for full local forecast. And then I get this. And I bet some of you have used this before. Maybe many of you have. But it does break down the days, and you've got some basic information about each day. But I'm going to show you what's the best part. This right here. And you can click on it and it'll pull it up. And this little graph here has pretty much everything. And I pulled up today, so you're looking at, I think I started it, well, I think it's right, it started right now, yeah. So it's showing you the rest of today. If we look at the top, we've got our temperature up here, the red, which kind of stands right out, which is great. They also put heat index in the summer, which we pay a lot of attention to when we're with school groups. And then this is wind, the second one down. And this is pretty important because gusty wind can be very dangerous with trying to paddle in some areas. So noting where your wind is going to be for the day or for the section of the day that you want to be out is really important for that. Whoops, sorry about that. I think it's going to take me a second to get back to that. There. Got a very sensitive computer. And then humidity, precipitation potential, and sky cover are the next one. But this one down here is pretty good. This is rain. And as you can see, we've got some rain today and tomorrow. And it looks like into Friday. Finally, we're getting some rain we really need. But it also shows you kind of slight chance up to occasional. And so you can kind of get a sense of what your day is going to be like. This is showing the rest of today. It's showing all of tomorrow, Thursday, and it's showing a guess till Friday. Now, I am going to say, having been a weather watcher for over 25 years, all spring, summer, and fall, because I have to think about groups going out, I have really learned that you really don't get your real accurate weather until within 24 hours, usually within 12 hours of your actual time that you want to go out. But you can look at it and you can see what's forecasted, and then you can click in and keep monitoring this. And you might notice a lot of changes in it over the next day or two, but then you'll have a sense of what you're dealing with if you're going out. And then the bottom one there, did it again, is thunderstorms and lightning. And that's a super important one for being on the water. So I really, really, really love this graph, and I use it very regularly, almost every day of my life now, just to check in about what's going on in weather, whether I'm going out on the water or just going outside to be with my outdoor animals. I'm going to go to my next one for you here. Hold on. So I'm going to go back, and the other area that you need to think about is water levels and safety, and that changes throughout the year. So we are very fortunate too that we have a USGS government site that maintains really accurate information on water data. And if you follow this site right here, you come up to current information for Massachusetts. I'm going to scroll down. You get this map of Massachusetts, and I bet other states probably have very similar, but I'm just focusing on Mass right now. And then once you pull in closely and zoom into it, you can actually find your river and your spot. And I believe that we are right here. Oh, no, sorry, I went to Wichenden. There we are. I'm going to pull up the Pepperell Dam water gauge. So when I do that, I get summary, and then I can go for a hydrograph. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Oh, wrong thing moving here. There we go. Okay. I can hydrograph, and I can see where the water levels are. And not only am I seeing water levels, but I'm actually looking at the cubic feet per second, which is the pressure of the water as it's moving through 1 cubic foot. And it can be remarkably, surprisingly dangerous when it gets stronger than these low levels that it is right now. So keeping an eye on that's pretty important. And if I can scroll in here, I'm just trying to see if I can do this. So you can, oh, nope, no forecast. Yeah, so there's a one that shows you how high it got. We've actually had some pretty big flood seasons in the past, and that's an interesting one to check out as well. But the hydrograph, I want to go back to the hydrograph. There is a way to see the whole year. I don't see how I'm going to do it here. But what I really want to say to you in that is that the spring season is often where you see a lot of the flooding. But if we have 3 or 4 days where we get a lot of rain, then we get some flooding. The water is dangerous. And sometimes people get excited about that and they want to go out and get in that water. And that is when too much danger can happen. So I'm always letting people know that that this water, even on our nice mild river, can be very pushy at the wrong time after a really good rainstorm or a really heavy spring melt. So we have to always be paying attention to that. So keep that in mind that these two sites are super helpful for you going forward as people who want to be on and near water. I also want to just kind of quickly mention that I always like to think about best practices on our rivers because we as humans do such impact and we have to really be thinking about it. So my favorites to mention to groups are to try to avoid as much animal conflict as possible. If you see something really cool, if you're in a canoe or a kayak, or even on a stand-up paddleboard and you're super quiet, a lot of times the animals basically continue to do what they want to do. But if you try to approach them, that's very threatening for them. And so it's really important that we give them their space and we respect them and their homes and try not to disturb their very specific habitat areas. We also like to talk about preventing invasive species from spreading. So if you are carting your boat to different bodies of water, it is really, really smart to clean your boat after each time that you take it out of the water. Just run a big hose over it, take a scrub brush and scrub it down. Make sure that there are no little bits of invasive plants that are going to be carried from location to location, because that has become one of our big issues, obviously, in our waterways around here. Take only photographs, that's my favorite because really it's important for us to see everything. When I take a group of 40 kids out on the water and every one of them wants to pick a water lily, it doesn't really go well. So we are really specific about that. And we tell them that they're not supposed to pick anything, but they can look at it, take a picture of it, whatever they would like, but we try to leave things as they are. Sharing the river with others, of course, is important. And I like to mention that because our main channels do have some powerboat usage. And so we have to be really thoughtful about where we paddle so that they have access and they're supposed to give us right of way as paddle people, as non-motorized boats. We basically do have the right of way, but it is also super helpful for them, for us to paddle along the edges of the river so that they have the main channel to move up and down if they need to. A lot of times they're fishing and their boats are just kind of resting and floating along just like us. Um, and then knowing how to deal with blowdowns and other obstacles. And that can get kind of serious. So I am going to mention that a little bit in the next slide here. Two really important hazards that we always want people to be aware of on rivers are what we call strainers and low head dams. A strainer is when a tree, if you look at my left-hand picture here, or a single log, even without its branches, falls into the water and the moving water past it carries the paddler or object into the tree. And because of the pressure of moving water, which as I said is really powerful, people can get trapped on, against, or underneath these objects, and they can be very, very dangerous and deadly. So scouting ahead of yourself, paying attention, and knowing that if a tree is down on river left, which is I just remind you that when you're on a river and it's going, if it's flowing in a certain direction and you're heading downstream in that direction, your left is river left and your right is river right. So it's always that way. No matter which direction you're heading, river left is going to be the direction of the left side of the river as the water's flowing um, downstream. And so strainers are very important to pay attention to. And if you can plan ahead and get you and your friends and your group and your family to really avoid that, that's important. And if you can't avoid it, the best thing to do really would be to get out and pull your boats around that area so that you're not putting yourself at any risk. And even a simple log like this one on the right with pushy water can be very dangerous if it's locked in and not able to move. This up here on the upper right is what we call a low head dam. And these dams still exist all over the rivers. Some of them have been removed in the last few years, but they do create a hazard. And it's not just that you come into something that may have trees and other objects on it, which is a hazard in itself, but when water goes over a dam and it hits this section of the water here, it actually goes down underneath the water and it creates a cycle. We call it the washing machine. And if you get trapped in that in a boat, it's very hard to get out of. And so we call this a hole. That's the professional term for that hazard, a hole. And on a low head dam, a hole can exist all the way across the river. So again, best thing to do is to get out above the dam, pull your boat out, and scout yourself around to the other side of the dam without going over it. So now I'm going to get to the good stuff because I was kind of giving you all the warnings. And I really, think that one of the reasons we love to get out there, many of us love to get out there, is for the nature. Probably all of us feel that way. So there's so much to see, to hear, to smell on the river, and to enjoy. And I'm just going to talk to you briefly about the fact that there's a tremendous variety of aquatic plant life to observe and to see at all different seasons of the year. And different things bloom at different seasons, so I find it's really fun to go out different times. Right now, the last blooming things are our beautiful cardinal flowers. They're still out there in some locations. Most other things have finished up for the year. Our water lilies, even though the flowers aren't there, they're still floating until freeze time. So you'll get to see those if you go out now. But it's really kind of a nice time to explore around and see what is still in bloom, but also these plants. And these plants play such an vital, vital, vital role to the health of our river because they provide not only direct nutrients to the river and oxygen, obviously, but they also provide habitat for insects and other small life that live in and around this area. So that leads us to our river fauna or our animals. And that can range from insects up through our big mammals. And let's not forget our turtles and other reptiles that are really fun to see. So we have a lot of different types of wildlife on the river. A lot of people don't realize that we have a real variety of mammals, not just our beaver and our muskrats, but we have mink, and this is a head of an otter. We have river otter in this area. They're pretty shy, hard to see sometimes, but they are out there and we see signs of them. And our turtle population is tremendous out there, particularly the painted turtle. We've got a tremendous number of painted turtles. This picture happens to be one of our endangered, I should say threatened turtles. And I'm totally blanking on the name, Lynn. Why am I blanking on it? Who knows the name of this?
Landings.
Thank you, Blandings, the Blandings turtle, known by its yellow chin. Thank you, Win. And so it's kind of fun to see these turtles out there. If you ever come upon a turtle with a yellow chin that has a couple of notches in its shell, that's because they're being monitored by people, their populations. And so humans have made a few little notches so that they can watch different populations and make sure that they're being successful in the areas that we know that they are breeding and laying their eggs and living. So that's kind of a fun thing to be looking for as well. And then I'm a huge birder, and there is nothing like birds on a river. We have a tremendous variety. We have nesting eagles in the area. We have a real variety of duck. One of my favorite is the wood duck. This is the male wood duck who is pretty popular out there, but they're pretty shy as well. So most people don't get a close-up look, but if you are really quiet, sometimes you get to observe them, which is nice. We have osprey, that's the one over here on the right that's eating. We call them a fish hawk. So they're not quite the size of an eagle, but they're a large animal. And then we have lots of herons, as you can see. I have one, I think that's a great white heron, but there's snowy egrets as well, and we have great blue. The bird in the middle here is the belted kingfisher. Very cool bird that can hover over the water and dive headfirst into the water to catch its fish. And it is one of the few birds that can hover rather than having to fly forwards, kind of like what hummingbirds do. It can kind of hold itself in place. And they are very, very fun to watch, and they make some great calls while they're out there. And this cute little pair over here on the left upper corner are our tree swallows. And swallows are super popular because there are so many insects flying over the water and using the waterways for their egg laying and uh, the process of metamorphosis that their species goes through. And these birds just know it, so they know when those different things are emerging, and they can come out and get dinner very easily. So birding is awesome. There are a lot of birds in the area. If you like to bird, there are a lot of bird walks in the area as well. And hopefully maybe someday we'll do some birding trips on the river. When I think we should talk about that. This is one of my additional slides and I call it What on Earth, because sometimes people send us photos or send us emails with questions or even show up at our door at the NRWA with things that they found that they didn't know what they were. So I just wanted to take a look at this and see if anybody recognizes anything here and knows. And you are absolutely willing to unmute and mention if you can recognize anything here. They're pretty cool. I'll see if anybody wants to share something. No IDs going on here.
Turtle on the top right.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you know which turtle that is?
no. And is that a beaver dam on the bottom right?
Believe it or not, that's a muskrat platform.
Muskrat. Okay.
Yep,
I can't tell the
muskrat
size of it.
platform. They build platforms out of cattails. The ducks are using it right now, but the muskrat uses it to climb up on and eat its vegetation that it likes to eat, its plants. And you find them usually mixed in where you do see cattails and other kind of taller plants as well. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
Um,
Anybody?
a month or so ago, I was at Trout Brook in Holden,
Yeah.
walking on a path, and all of a sudden there was a 5-foot bird standing in front of me, walking on the path. I've never seen it, but I hope the top middle one is not a snake.
No, but I know it's hard to tell, isn't it? Let me see if I can zoom. I guess I can't zoom in. So I'm glad you mentioned this one because what you're seeing are water lily roots. The root system of water lilies are enormous fat tubers that span the whole area in great depths of, great expansion of area. And they are quite large. And off of them comes the each individual water lily plant. And then when the water lilies die off at the end of the year, these still stay underwater and are waiting for the next season, spring season, to start the process again.
Now,
Once in a
why
while,
is it at surface level?
say it again.
Why is it at surface level?
So what happens is that sometimes they get uprooted and get pushed up, or the water gets low enough in that area where all of a sudden they're exposed. So I can't remember what this picture came from, but I've seen it both ways. And they're a very popular food for some of our big animals, including moose. When you think of moose standing knee deep in little wetlands, when you see those pictures of them up in Maine with their heads in the water, a lot of times what they're eating is not just the vegetation, but these root systems because they're very, they've got a lot of starch and carbohydrate to them. They were actually eaten by the indigenous people as a form of food. They would make them into a flour. So that's cool. Our little turtle on the right here, the reason I like to put him in is this is a musk turtle, and he's got the funniest pointy head. He's got it stretched way out, and his very unique way of exiting water is often that he will climb up on a log. It's usually a log at 45 degrees. It's very interesting that they choose a certain type of log and they hang really high, and then as you're paddling closer, all of a sudden you'll see them just plop into the water. So they have this very unique habit or behavior that I find interesting, but you can sort of recognize them by the high arch shell and this interesting pointy face. And they're called a musk turtle because they do have a musky smell to them. Down on the middle section here is a Baltimore Oriole nest. They're a weaver bird, and so we see these a lot. The Baltimore Orioles are very common on the riverways now, very, very common. And on the left here in the lower corner are, they're called oak galls. And a gall is a container that is created by a plant, like an oak tree, for an insect that has actually laid its egg on the plant. And then the tree reacts to the chemicals in that insect, or that larva, I should say, and creates this home for the growing larva. And when the larva's done and the little insect comes out, it comes out through that hole. And on oak trees, it's often a type of wasp, a little tiny wasp that does this, which is kind of interesting. And last but not least, in the upper corner is what we call a bryozoa. And they can be as big as a basketball. They are these floating gelatinous, well, usually they're semi-attached to something. Sometimes they look like they're floating, but they tend to grow around or next to a branch or an underwater log. And they grow over the summer. And they start out as individual single-celled organisms, and they create this colony, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as a colony, they support each other as a larger unit, feeding and surviving and reproducing. And then they disappear at the end of the season. You don't see them in the winter, and then in the spring they grow again. So they sort of fall apart and start all over. So those are kind of some of the fun things that we discover and get excited about when we're out there. Whoop, there we go. So now I'm going to get to you to our canoe guide so that you can understand a little bit more about ways to help you find the best spots to go for you wherever you would like to explore. The great news is that we have this canoe guide that we have created, and it's in its, how many editions now, Win? I'm forgetting. 3?
This the one that's about to come out will be the 7th.
7th. I'm behind. Our 7th edition. And while we are out of the 6th edition now, we don't have any more. We are hoping this will be out very soon, hopefully within the next month or so, and hopefully before the holidays if people want to get them as gifts for people. But they are a small, very useful little guide, and I just want to give you an idea of what's in them. Each of these sections of rivers that people like to paddle are broken down in the guide by maps and by descriptions. So this is a description page of a section of the Nashua River from Route 117 in Lancaster to the Still River Depot Road in Harvard. And in each section, you will see that there's some very basic information. We immediately highlight hazards that you need to think about. If there's something that we think is specific to the area, what to expect, that's down here in this colored box. And then we have highlighted what to look for along those specific miles. So in this section, we have, within 0.6, 0.5 miles, we've got something else for you to look for. And this happens to be looking for the Dead River, which is a section of the river, what we call an oxbow, that doesn't really have an outlet, but when you go inside of it, it has a lot of wildlife in there. So you can use this guide step by step as you're paddling to look for fun things to do and to explore along the way. And even though the guide is not 100% waterproof, it's made on semi-water resistant materials. So they work really well. I keep mine in a Ziploc bag, pull it out, use it, and they're pretty hardy, I have to say. So they have the description, but they also have these awesome maps. And this map is a map of an area you might be familiar with, which is the Route 119 area to Pepperell Dam. A lot of people paddle this section, and so I like to share this one. So right on 119, we have two boat launches, and you can see they're marked by arrows. And then we've got a drawing of the waterways all the way through, and there are some highlights like this is actually now being called the Marion Stoddard um, conservation area. And there'll be more information in the new map about that. The name has changed. That's kind of the things that we're doing right now to get this new map out the door. And you will see that there are different launches, takeout areas, and then of course hazards like the Pepperell Dam is highlighted here. And you've got a legend down at the bottom that will help you with reading your map. And they're really quite accurate. So you will find the sizes vary and the orientation. So you need to kind of look for your compass up at the top. This shows you this sort of shows you what is north, so that if you're trying to orient yourself on your map, you can do that. And each map is a little bit different that way. But I think you'll find if you haven't already used this guide, you'll find it super helpful for this area. And it does cover the Nashua and all four of our major tributaries. So it covers quite a bit of the, pretty much all of the river. The other coming soon excitement is our online interactive paddle maps that Win has been working very hard on. And we have them connected to 5 suggested paddles. These paddles are what we call pretty basic paddles. They're pretty easy to do. They're flat water. They're beginner or family friendly. And we call them round trips. That's meaning that you can park in one spot, go out and come back. We've got these 5 sort of set at about 2 miles or less. And so these are really helpful, but the cool part now is that not only you're going to have information about these 5, but you're also going to have a way of interacting with that map. And that is on our website. There will be a page that will look like the one on the right here. I know it's kind of small print for you to see, but I'm gonna, whoop, I knew that would happen. It's small for you to see, but when you get here, you're going to be able to click on your map and you're going to get not only written information, but this very cool interactive map of the paddle that we are recommending. And in this map, you can see that you can put in right here at this green spot. And if you click on it, you actually get a picture of what it's going to look like when you start your trip. And then along the way on this trip, which is from the canoe and kayak launch all the way to the bridge, which I'm not sure if we can see it on here. Whoop, yeah, sorry about that. You can zoom in and out, obviously, which is pretty nice. Oh, here, there's the bridge. There's Fitch's Bridge. And so it shows you that route, and it even gives you some highlights along the way. So as you're going, you might see that there are things that you want to look for, like this. It looks to me like that is a beaver scent mound where beavers are marking their territory, and you can look for those. And there's a lot of cool things that Win and some other staff were photographing to add to this so that you have some things to check out along the way. So these interactive maps are great. And then of course you've got on the left the paddle description, paddle trip description, your points of interest, and see, you can actually see Fitch's Bridge in this one, I think. Fitch's Bridge is a really beautiful footbridge that exists just south of Petapowa Boat Launch, upstream. So that's kind of a fun designation for people to paddle to and paddle underneath as well. All right, I'm going to exit back to here. And so now you have a sense of what that is. And you can make use of all of this fairly soon because it is in its final stages of getting produced and put on the website. And am I right, Win, that we will be announcing it with our e-news when it is ready?
Yep, we'll let everybody know, and anybody who signed up for this program will make sure that you get the word when those are launched.
Yeah, really great. And you know, you can even probably when you pull this up, I'm going to try this again. I mean, you could make this page something that you printed out if you wanted to take with you. So it's pretty cool, or it'd be on your phone as well if you wanted to pull it up on water, if you're comfortable with your phone on water. So pretty exciting new stuff to add to it. So at the end of my little presentation before our questions and talking, I just want to encourage you to go paddle and enjoy it. Make sure you plan, prepare, and then get out there because that's really the best part of living here is we've got some awesome places to go and to explore on water.